G'day folks, so I'm here with Red. Red is a purebred alpine dingo. You gonna say hello, Red? No, you're focused on something over there. Now, there's a lot of myths and fallacies about dingoes. Dingoes are a beautiful dog. They are a native Australian dog. Some people say they're not native, but they've been here about 4,000 to 5,000 years. That pretty much makes them native in my book. But a lot of people think, oh, hello, boy. A lot of people think that the only purebred dingoes left are found out on Gari, out on Fraser Island. That's not actually true. There's a lovely lady by the name of Dr. Kylie Cairns, who's a dingo geneticist. What's the matter? You see the other dog, you want to go play. And Dr. Kylie Cairns has actually found out there's actually 5 species of dingo, or 5 genetic species of dingo. You've got the alpine dingo, which Red is here. They're found in Victorian highlands, around the Snowy Mountains, those sort of areas. You've got the coastal dingo, or the east coast dingo, and then you've got the tropical dingo found up in the tropics of far north Queensland, the central dingo from the centre of Australia, and you've got the western dingo as well. And she's actually proven that dingoes, genetically, there's a lot of purebred dingoes all over the country. Come here. Yeah, Helen. A lot of people think that dingoes have crossbred with domestic dogs, but Dr. Cairns has actually found out that dingoes very rarely actually interact with wild dogs, let alone breed with them. They tend to stick to their own little family groups. So there's purebred dingoes all over the country. And she's proven that through genetic samples. Okay. Is that right, mate? Now, Red here is the typical white and tan for a dingo. This is what a lot of dingoes look like. They have the beautiful golden tan coloured coat, the lovely little white socks, and normally a little white tip on his tail. I don't know if you can see it there, but he's got a little white tip on his tail. That's typical dingo, but it's not all dingoes. Dingoes do vary a lot in colour. Red's mum was actually pure white. Alpine dingoes coming from cold areas in the snow tend to be a lot lighter. They tend to have a lot thicker fur too. You can see that Red here, he's got his summer coat on. He's molting a little bit, but they get a thicker coat. But dingoes vary in colour a lot, from virtually pure white all the way up to black. I mean, I've seen pure black dingoes, which are genetically pure dingoes, but they're pure black. So they do vary a lot in colour. And that's where they get misconstrued, where they're actually crossing with wild dogs. A lot of people think if they're not the pure white and tan, they're obviously mixed with wild dogs, but we've proven genetically that they're actually not. They do come in a varied range of colours. So, but Red here is a gorgeous, typical, pure alpine dingo. You're a good looking fella, aren't you too, boy? So, dingoes, even though they're an apex predator, they get a little bit of a bad rap. A lot of people think that dingoes are really dangerous. You know, the old, oh, dingo ate my baby. That was a very rare occurrence which happened over 40 years ago, you know. But dingoes, you don't really have to be scared of them. Dingoes out in the wild, out in the outback of Australia on the mainland, you won't get anywhere near them. Most of the time when you see them is them disappearing over a ridgeline because they've seen you first, or they've smelt you coming. They don't want anything to do with you. They're very shy, very elusive creatures. There are a couple of places in Australia where it's a little bit of a different story, like Gari, for example, or Fraser Island. Now, out on Fraser Island, you do have to be a little bit wary of the dingoes. Now, it's not really the dingoes' fault, it's our fault as humans. We've mistreated the dingoes out on Fraser Island. A lot of people were going out there and feeding them. Dingoes are very intelligent animals. They're one of the smartest canines in the world. They're very, very, very intelligent. They're also scavengers. Okay, so they'll learn an easy way of getting a food source. And they see humans feeding them, they associate humans with food. Then the dingoes go up to a human, doesn't have food, the dingo gets upset, gives the person a little bit of a nip. But that's the human fault, okay? The humans are doing the wrong thing. So if you go out to places like Gari, a couple of things you should do. One, never approach the dingoes. Just leave them alone. Never feed the dingoes. You should never feed any wild animal, for that matter. Let them do their own thing. But just leave them alone, just stay back from them, and you should be fine. But they get a bit of a bad rap. They're not dangerous, they're not aggressive. I mean, look at Red, he's gorgeous, eh? Now, dingoes, they've actually found, a lot of farmers have actually found that areas that have a good population of dingoes actually have a very low population of foxes and feral cats. Dingoes go through and they take out the competition. So they're actually really good for our ecosystem. And we've learnt that when you take out an apex predator, which a dingo is in Australia, it's an apex predator, there's a knock-on effect. And we've learnt that through, like, Yosemite, with the wolves in Yosemite. They took the wolves out and it created huge environmental problems. The deer and the elk numbers went through the roof because there was no wolves to prey on those deer and elk. Consequently, they started eating all the grasses, which created erosion, which created salinity. It was actually affecting fish out on the ocean. So it's amazing how just taking one apex predator out of an ecosystem can actually affect the whole ecosystem. And we found that with dingoes as well. Dingoes are a great way of controlling kangaroos. That's their main prey, or their main food source is kangaroos. You take an apex predator out of an area, the kangaroo numbers go through the roof. Consequently, they get into plague or pest proportions. They create erosion problems, and there's all sorts of knock-on problems. So we've got to sort of learn as humans not to mess with Mother Nature. Mother Nature knows what she's doing. Isn't that right, Red? Eh? Isn't that right? Good boy. So dingoes in the wild, they eat a varied array of diet. One of their main food sources is kangaroos. Kangaroos and dingoes have a good relationship as prey and predator. But dingoes will scavenge pretty much anything. They eat a lot of insects and that sort of stuff, believe it or not, especially out in desert areas. They'll eat grasshoppers, that sort of thing. Small mice, a lot of the small marsupials like hopping mice and antechinus and melomys, that sort of thing. And they will occasionally browse, like alpine dingoes will eat things like berries, that sort of stuff. So they will actually eat some vegetable matter, but they're mainly carnivores, but they're scavengers, okay? They go around looking for food. So a lot of the time when you're out in the outback areas, you'll find dingoes walking along the road looking for roadkill. They've worked out that roadkill is an easy source of food. They'll actually watch the birds, watch the ravens and the eagles and the whistling kites, look for where they're circling, which will point out food for them. Dingoes have been used by Indigenous Australians for thousands of years. It's one of the earliest recordings, interactions between humans and having a canine as a companion. They've used them a lot for the women. They would hang around with the women and children, protect the women and children, and just keep them as companions. They would also help the women to hunt out small rodents and small animals, lizards and that sort of stuff, chasing them out of the grass for the women to hunt. They would occasionally go out with the men to help hunting, but a lot of the time the dingoes would get too excited or they'd scare off prey, so the men normally went out by themselves. But the dingoes have been a companion for Indigenous Australians for, well, between 4,000 to 5,000 years since they came down across the land bridges from Papua New Guinea and Indonesia. So as I said, one of the earliest recorded interactions between a relationship between humans and canines was dingoes and Indigenous Australians. Hey? You've been our mate for a long time, haven't you, buddy? Hey? So as I was saying, dingoes are a native canine to Australia. I consider them native canines. We do have a thing, I did say the term wild dog before. Now, we don't actually have a true wild dog in Australia. What I'm talking about when I refer to as wild dogs is domestic dogs gone wild. Okay, they're not actually a true wild dog. In Australia, we have dingoes, and that's it. We used to have the thylacine, but that's no longer around. But when I say wild dogs, I mean feral dogs. Okay, domestic dogs gone wild, which do cause a major problem in farming areas in Australia, also in our native environment. But this guy's not a wild dog. He's not wild at all. Look at him. No. Too chilled out, aren't you, buddy? Hey? Oi, supposed to be on camera. Nah, he's going to sleep. So there you go, folks. Beautiful red, a lovely, purebred Australian alpine dingo. What do you reckon, mate? Ask any dingo. They'll tell you. You got it.